Hey, welcome to Flash Body Mechanics 1, Walk, Jump, and Cycle. So in this lesson we're going to learn how to do a walk cycle and we're going to also animate a jump cycle. Let's open up our jump first. We'll do the jump, it's a little less involved than the walk cycle. So this class is going to be a little intense, just bear with me here. So when you open up your jump cycle file, you'll notice you have your shot comp layer and your camera view layer as usual. Keep the camera view layer locked and we won't even touch that. So select the lower body of the mannequin and you'll notice that the shot comp encompasses the mannequin and the background. That's why you have a symbol encompassing all of it. So let's just dive into that. And inside our shot comp we have the mannequin, all in one symbol. We have a shadow layer. We'll keep that separate because we're going to animate that separately at the end. And there's a background layer which is also locked. And we'll just leave that locked. Okay, so let's select the mannequin and double click on it to get inside the layer. Once we're inside there, to get inside the symbol. Once we're inside that symbol, you'll notice we have a body part, a layer for each body part of the mannequin. We have an upper pelvis, a lower pelvis, an upper leg for both right and left, a lower leg for both right and left, and then of course 2 feet. Just going to undo all that. We're basically doing cutout animation. Alright, so as we always do, we're going to start our animation out with just simply blocking out the timing and the posing. And by now we should have a pretty good idea of how timing works. With spacing our drawings farther apart with more in-betweens gives us a slower movement, and placing our drawings closer together with less in-betweens gives us a faster movement. And when we're blocking out our animation, it really is like, you think of blocking as a rough draft. If you're writing a story or you're writing music, we always do a rough draft. Any form of art requires a rough draft, and then we refine it to improve the quality. So let's select the pelvis and the 2 upper legs. Turn our onion skinning on. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit to get a better look at what we're doing here. Okay, so we're going to bring him into his first pose. Let's bring it down to the left just a little bit, and then we'll select the legs. Now I'm just going to get him into a squash pose here, where his legs are bent and his upper body's down. Now feel free to go ahead and squash these body parts as we're animating. Normally if I was drawing this leg, I would foreshorten this. I can go into the leg symbol and make another drawing for this leg, but I'm not going to do that. I don't think I really need to do that. I can just simply squash it for now. The animation is going to go by rather quickly, so I want to push this pose as much as I possibly can. We really want to get him down as low as we can without it looking ridiculous, but we want to leave these feet planted for now. So sometimes you just got to stretch out the leg to get that ankle joint to connect with the foot. Okay, I think that's okay for now. In our next pose, he's going to launch off the ground, so this is going to be a quick movement. We want there to be a lot of energy in this next movement as he's launching himself up off the ground, so the drawings are going to be further apart with very little in-betweens. We're only going to go 2 frames down the timeline and set a key for the entire row of all the body parts. Let's just grab his pelvis and upper legs and bring them way up high here. So again, we'll just do this rough. Alright, so now we have to choose some feet for this pose. Now I added some for this particular class. We'll use the foot on frame 24. So select your foot, go to the properties on the right side, punch in 24 under first, and then we'll move that foot to where it belongs. We're going to use it for both feet. He pushed off, the feet just left the ground. So again, these 2 drawings are spaced far apart, and there's only one in between these 2 poses. So this will be a quick movement. Alright, now for the next 3 drawings, he's going to be nearing the top of his jump. We want to ease into this and ease out, just like the ball bounce. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Go 3 down the timeline, set a key, a row of keys all the way down all the layers. And we're going to go back to my selection tool, and we're going to move this guy way up. So there's going to be one here, the next one's going to be up here, and then the next one will return back to here. So for this one, we'll start here. I'm just going to bring the legs up a little bit. Another thing to remember in animation is you want to avoid twinning. So you want to avoid having these legs exactly the same. So I'm just going to pose it a little bit different from the other leg. When extremities like legs and arms are moving at exactly the same rate and pose. It just looks too robotic. Okay, we'll just leave that like that for now. Again, we're blocking here. So we'll go 3 more frames down the timeline. Select the entire row. And if you don't remember, you click the top layer. You can hold Shift down and click the bottom layer to select the whole row, or you can just drag all the way down. F6. Now we're going to go to the top, and we can bring the legs up a little more. Now this is where his legs will catch up to his pelvis. Now if you don't remember from last class, when we select more than one symbol, the pivot will average in between the two of them, and you'll have to move it to where you want it to pivot from. So here I have both leg pieces selected, the upper and lower leg, and I just move the pivot to the hip because that's where I want to move. That's where I want it to rotate from. If I release and select them again, it'll average again, and I'll have to keep moving it back just for the posing. But for each individual symbol, the pivot does stay where it's supposed to be. Okay, so now we have to choose 2 different feet for this pose. Let's double click on the foot to get inside the symbol and turn off onion skinning so we're not seeing all the different feet. Now we can use our stepping keys or greater than less than keys just to step through and see what an appropriate foot might be. I think maybe number 3 might be okay, but let's just sometimes I take a look through all of them just to find something that might be better. So let's go with 26. Double click on the weight area to get back out of the symbol and select the foot symbol and type in 26. Punch in 26. Okay, I just found a better foot for this pose. So it's on frame 14. So I'm going to punch in 14 here. Okay, that's a better foot. I didn't realize it because it was flipped around the other way. So that we can scale this, move it, rotate it to where we need it to be. Alright, so let's take a look at what we've done so far. Let's go back to frame 1 here. I'm just going to region select this whole area. So we got our anticipation pose, our launch pose, and then we're going to have 3 poses at the top of the jump. 1, 2, and then we're going to go back to something like this. Because the next pose is similar to the previous one, I'm actually just going to copy it. I'm going to select the entire row, right click, and copy frames. And then 1, 2, 3 down the timeline again. Select the row, and right click and paste frames. And then it pushed over the original keys, so let's just delete that row at the end. Clear keyframe, and then so now that we've copied was it pose 3, it brings us right back down to here. It's close to what we want to get for the next pose. It gets us more than halfway there, so really I just want to change the feet, and I'll probably move the legs a little bit. Now as the pelvis is heading on its way back down toward the ground, I'm gonna have the legs actually closer to the last pose that we had. So we want the legs to sort of drag behind a little bit. Just keeping things very rough here. I'm going to give the feet a bit of drag. Actually, you know what? That's too close to the last pose, so I'm actually going to straighten the legs back out a little bit. Alright, that's good for now. So I'm going to go back to frame 1 and just scrub through. Okay, so we have our anticipation pose, our launch pose, and then 1, 2, 3 poses at the top of the jump, which are closer together. Now we're going to go back into something very similar to our launch pose, where it's the pose right before he impacts the ground. So let's copy frame all of key pose 2, select the entire row, right click and copy frames. Go back to the last pose that we did, step 2 frames down the timeline, 1, 2. This is going to be a quick movement, so we're only going to do 2 frames down. Right click the whole row and paste frames, and get rid of that row that it pushed over. Clear keyframe. Alright, I don't want those feet for this pose. That's the launch pose that we did, pose 2. Now this pose we're going to actually bend the knees a little bit. Yes, he's reaching for the ground, but he is on his way down, so I think the knees would be a little bit more bent, just to give us the impression that his legs actually have weight to them. Okay, so let's use this foot. What was that, 13? Okay, we'll do for 13 again in the properties. Type in 13, and the foot will switch. Keeping it rough. Let's just move on. Alright, so now we're going to copy the entire first key pose, all the layers, or sorry, all the keyframes on that layer, on all the layers. The whole row, copy frames, and paste. Now he's dropping at this point. He's falling, he'd be gaining a lot of speed. So I'm not even going to have any in-betweens at all. I'm going to select the entire row right next to our last row of keyframes and paste. And get rid of that last row that I pushed over. Clear keyframe. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give that a bit of a hold. If you remember in the past, we've held some of our anticipation poses and actually created a moving hold on them. So what I'm going to do is 3 more frames down the timeline, set a key. Now it's all selected. Q for my free transform tool, I'm going to give it a bit of a squash. Before you do that though, move the pivot point right down to the bottom. I'm going to squash it down a bit in Y and stretch it out an equal amount, approximate equal amount in X. Let's go back to frame 1, hit enter on your keyboard. Alright, kind of hard to tell. It looks pretty good. It's a nice blocking pass. So before I continue, before I tween anything, I actually want to change these feet. I don't want to have the feet go from these feet, this angle of the foot, to this angle of the foot. It's too extreme, so I'm just going to go onto the pose number 3 and change it back to what we had originally. So I'm going to go back to that pose, our third pose, switch the foot to 2, and switch this one to 1 in the properties. These feet to these feet to these feet. So that's just a bit of an easier transition. Now I'm not refining yet, I'm just sort of looking over my blocking pose. So I'm going to get the onion skinning on. I want to make sure that I have a real solid blocking pose before I actually start refining. Okay, so pose 1 to pose 2, we can see there how far apart those drawings are. I'm just going to go to the top here. If you look in the timeline area, I have my onion skinning on. I'm going to increase this range slider at the top, which shows me more of my drawings. Alright, so we have a great distance between our anticipation pose and our launch pose. And then you can see the other distances. These poses at the top, I want to get those a little closer together. So I'm going to move this entire pose a little closer to the top pose. So I'm going to hold shift down and just with my up arrow key bring it up a little closer. And there's this pose that's fine. And then the next pose, actually it drops. He's starting to drop here, so I think that's okay to have it further apart. Might bring it a tad bit closer together. The whole point of having these drawings closer together is so that it hangs a bit more at the top. I actually think it would be better to have a better contrast between this drop pose and the contact pose, the impact pose I'm going to call it. I know I left the knees bent a little bit, but I'm actually going to give it a little bit more reach. Alright, so let's go ahead and tween everything. Alright, so if you play it now the feet are going to flip and do all kinds of crazy stuff, so just ignore that for now. Go back to frame 1, play it again. I'm looking at the pelvis to get a good impression of how fast our launch is, how much hang we have at the top, and just the general contrast and speed as this thing jumps up and down. It's not too bad. I'd like a little more hang at the top. I'm just going to separate some of these poses. So let's go to where the very top pose is, where he's at the highest point. I'm going to separate that out from the pose before that, so it'll create more in-betweens. Select that entire block, or you can drag from top to bottom. Just click on that whole block and let's just slide it 1 frame to the right, and then we'll do the same thing with the next pose. Select the entire block just to create more space in between all these poses, right? Or all these layers. Now if we play it again, there, that hangs a little bit better. And before I go any further, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Flash's ease function like we did in our previous class. So what I'm going to do here is select the entire row of tweens, anywhere in between these 2 key poses. Go to the properties area and we're going to ease into the highest pose, the top pose. So we're going to go all the way to 100 with this. And what that's doing is it's bringing it in and cushioning it slower. It's cushioning the top pose. And if you turn onion skinning on, you can see it. There, you can see that the poses get closer and closer together. Now on this opposite side, we're going to do the opposite thing. We're going to ease out of the top pose. So we're going to go the opposite way in the easing. We're going to set it to -100, and you'll see those snap closer together. So now we take onion skinning off, zoom out. Let's watch how it hangs a little bit better. It's a nice soft cushion into the top pose, and it eases in and eases out. So let's take a look at the knees and see if any upper leg and lower leg joints break off. Not really. I think I saw one right there. Right there. So let's fix that, and then we'll fix the feet. Alright, so let's just go to both shins. You can control select to get both of those layers, and F6, or you can just F6 this one and F6 that one. Now that we've set a key, we can just reposition. Okay, I think the rest of them are okay. Okay, so let's fix the feet now. The feet are going to be a bit of work, so let's go to the layer that says shoe. Alright, so we're going to scrub through. Just click and hold your time marker here, and let's scrub through. Alright, so we know we got to fix this. I'm feeling like I want to actually move this pose up a little higher. Alright, so let's just drag select the whole thing. Go to place your time marker on the second pose. We're going to move the whole thing up a little higher, so I'm just going to hold shift and use my arrow up keys. Just give it maybe two taps up. The reason why is because I want to change these feet at frame 2. Go to the shoe layer and go to frame 2 and just F6 to set a key. Do the same thing with the other foot. Let's set a key, and then we're going to change the feet. So I'm just looking at what these feet are. These are feet number 24. So let's go to these feet and change it to 24. Select the symbol and the properties, change it to 24, and we'll reposition those. So we're just in-betweening now is basically what we're doing. Okay, so let's go to the next problem. So basically what we want to do is take this foot, copy it to the center, and then take this foot on pose 3 and copy it to the center between pose 2 and 3. So basically it's going to switch really fast. So let's take a look at what our pose 3 foot is. It's on number 2, foot number 2, so we're going to look in the properties. It's foot number 2. So we'll switch the one before it to foot number 2, and we'll have it changed just a little earlier. Okay, and if we scrub our animation, so we got to zoom out a little bit. So we'll just straighten these out. So I'm just stepping back and forth and watching the left foot here. We're just going to go through and do the entire left foot. Okay, so between pose 3 and 4, we have a foot change as well. The artwork changes. So what we're going to do, these are 1, 2, 3, 4 apart. So between pose 3 and 4, we have to have the foot switch. So let's go in the middle and switch it, and we'll have it switch to this foot. So if we select it, it's pose 20, or it's foot number 26. So right in between pose 3 and 4, we're going to switch that foot to 26. Okay, so we're going to have to fix this foot as well. Let's just set a key there. Just select the frame, set a key, and we'll just replace it. And I'll scrub over. Maybe we can get this foot closer to what the next one is, closer to this one. So we see that it's pointed up and it's over to the right a little more. So let's actually skew this, just so it's closer to what the next drawing looks like. And this one we can skew it closer to what the previous drawing looks like. So let's skew it down a little bit, and maybe even rotate it a slight bit. So when we play it, it'll be a little more of a smoother transition. You can scrub over it and watch. Alright, let's just continue with the right foot. Okay, so we have another artwork change here. The foot changes into this one. Between this pose and this pose, we have a foot change. We place a key right in the center between those two. We get this foot to match closer to what this foot is doing. So we'll just scale it down a little bit, or not scale it down, we'll skew it a tiny bit. Let's zoom in. And we'll just skew it so that it sort of hooks up with the next foot. Maybe angle it down a bit. I'm just going to scrub over that and watch the effect. Okay, so let's watch the entire thing. I'm just keeping my eye on the right foot right now to see how it looks. I'm gonna go to frame 1 and press enter. Looks pretty smooth. Okay, so we'll do the same thing with the left foot. Starting right at the beginning, let's go back to frame 1 and let's look for the problem areas. Okay, between frame 2 and 3, we're gonna have to key all those feet. What we can do is just select all these frames between 2 and 3 and press F6. It'll set 2 keys, and we'll just go in and fix them. It's a little easier now because we can see what we did on the previous foot. Alright, so with this one we'll just move it. And we switched feet, so we'll go to, let's go inside the foot symbol and choose a foot. I'm going to go with this one. I think that's the original foot, so it's on frame 1. It's the very first foot. Go back out, let's make sure the foot's selected. Let's change it in the properties to 1. And we'll just give it a better position. Let's match it closer to this foot pointing down. So maybe I can skew it a bit and rotate it. Okay, so we fixed that transition. Alright, so now we gotta look at between 3 and 4. Yeah, the foot just flips all over the place. So I'm gonna set a key on the 2 frames inside there, between pose 3 and 4, like so. And let's just copy pose 3's foot to the next frame. Copy frames, paste. That sorts that out. And then I'll go to pose 4's foot on the timeline and I'll copy it and just go to the left 1 frame and paste it there. So the transition happens in the middle between pose 3 and 4. This one can also be this foot. So I'm just copying, going to the problem foot and pasting. And let's just scrub over that. Okay, so it just switches. But what we can do is have this foot closer to this foot. So we'll go back to this foot, skew it up a little bit, maybe rotate it. That way it looks like it's getting closer to what this foot's going to be. And this one we can make it closer to the previous one again. So we'll select it, rotate it down a little, and maybe even skew it. This is kind of a cheat we do in Flash just to make things look like they're transitioning, the artwork is transitioning. Alright, so we did between 3 and 4. Now let's check the feet. We're going to check this left foot between pose 3 and 4 and 5. And that looks okay. I can see it slides a little bit, so let's get in there and fix that. And this foot's also sliding, fix that one as well. Okay, so between 4 and 5 it's okay. And then from 5 to 6, the drop pose, the foot flips around. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy the foot from pose 5. We're going to copy it here and paste it right next door. Paste and bring it down, and then we're going to rotate it just to get it closer to the next frame's foot. So there, we copied this foot to this frame, and then it switches on the next frame. So we can actually maybe rotate that or skew it down a bit. Okay, so I think we're good here. So let's go back to frame 1 and play it. So one last thing I think I might do is go to frame 2. Maybe we can actually stretch this a little bit. So it squashes. This is our second last frame, and then it squashes into our last key pose, and then it's going to return back to frame 1 and then go for the jump again. So what we're going to do is we're going to just lose all these frames, these extra frames at the end. Select remove frames. So we want our animation to stop there, and it's going to revert back to 1. The way we're going to do that is go to our shot comp. So we're just going to, or double click anywhere in this white area just to get out of this layer of symbol layer, and we're going to select the symbol with our mannequin 3/4 on it, and it encompasses the entire mannequin. And we're going to go to our properties under looping, make sure that it's set to loop, and it's under first it says 1. So basically what it's doing is it's going to loop it starting at frame 1. So if we just play this, it should loop our jump, and it is. So you can see the nice impact that the squash had. It's giving us a nice ease in and ease out at the end, or you can say a nice cushion on the impact pose, and it's cushioned at the top, giving us the impression of weight and gravity. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to animate our shadow. So as the character jumps up into the air, we're going to want the shadow to sort of dissipate a little bit. As he gets far away from the ground, his body is casting less of a shadow on it. Go to the point where he leaps. We'll set a key here in the shadow layer. So F6. And then let's go to the point where he's at the very top of his jump. So that would be right there. Set a key. And then we'll go right back to where he lands again. We'll set another key. And then we're going to hold it until he leaves the ground again. And set another key. So that's where it'll start to get small again. Alright, so let's just animate that and then we'll cycle it. Alright, so he's at the top. So the second pose of the shadow. Now select the shadow and hold shift down with your free transform tool activated. Hold shift down, grab the corner, and let's just scale it right down. Scale it down to about half or maybe a third of the size. And then when he comes back down, it's going to pop back to its regular size. And then it holds. Now let's go back to where we shrunk it down. Let's select that key and the last three keys we set. Copy frames. And then we'll go back up to the top where we want it to shrink again. And make sure you get it right at the point where he's at the very highest part of his bounce, the very highest frame, or the highest pose. And then we'll right click that frame and paste frames. So now when we drag over, it should cycle that. Alright, we'll do the same thing. Just keep going down the timeline. Go to the highest point, his highest position, and paste the frame. And then you'll see that it created all these other frames. So we're just gonna drag over these and just remove frames. And then we can just tween all of this. So a quick way to tween an entire layer of keys is just to select the first key, select the last frame, select the entire frame, and create classic tween. Alright, so if we watch that now, let's just play it from frame 1, and you can see the shadow dissipating. So let's go back out to our scene 1, or our outer layer of our symbols, and let's just save this. Go to save as, and you can save it as something like jump animated. Just put animated at the end so you know what it is. I've already saved mine. And then we can go to File, Export. It's export a video, so you can send it to me. Export video, convert video in Adobe Media Coder. Leave that checked. It should already be like this. Stop exporting when last frame is reached. That's fine. And press Export. Alright, so once your Adobe Media Coder opens, this is very important. Change FLV. If it says FLV, change, or no matter what it says, change this one to QuickTime. This should be on 720p. And then if you can click on this, you can navigate to the folder you want your QuickTime movie to be in. And then you press save. Name it. I would prefer if you named it Flash Body Mechanics 1 Jump, and then just save it. I'm not going to do it because I've already saved one of these. Alright, well that's it for the jump. Let's get into the walk. Alright, so now let's open up Flash Body Mechanics 1 _ walk. Alright, so now we're going to do our walk cycle. So once you get in there, we're going to find the same thing that we have in all of our files here. We're going to have a shot comp and a camera view. So you'll notice in our shot comp we have the mannequin's lower body again. We have a background, which is just the horizon line, and I included a little snippet from Preston Blair's cartoon animation book. The walk cycle is a pretty complex movement to animate. It has just about every animation principle in it, almost every animation principle in this motion. The way it's been explained to me is it's like controlled falling. The walk cycle moves in a forward motion. The body's usually leaning forward in the direction of the motion, and we're always catching ourselves. It's like controlled falling. We're always catching ourselves with this heel in this contact pose. So I've included a little snippet from Preston Blair's cartoon animation book. There's a few other books that I'd like to actually share with you. This is the cover of Preston Blair's cartoon animation book. It's really old school. It's a little dated, but there's still a lot of really good techniques in here that are still valid. So this is a really great book to own. I grew up on this book, and that's where this walk cycle is from. Another book is The Illusion of Life. by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston. Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston are two of Disney's original animators, and those are the two guys that wrote this book and documented for the first time, as far as I know, the principles of animation. So this is considered by a lot of animators, a lot of people in the animation industry, to be the Bible of animation. It also has a lot of history as well, where they talk about some of the happenings inside the Walt Disney's original studio as they were animating a lot of the classics. So it's a really good book to own. This is another really good book. Almost every animator I know owns this book. It's called The Animator's Survival Kit by Richard Williams. It's a little more recent. It has a lot of great stuff in it. It literally is an animator's survival kit. Another good author is Chris Hart. Chris Hart writes, he has a whole series, he's authored a whole series of animation books which are very relevant and really good books to learn from. Alright, well, let's just start with this walk cycle. So in our shot comp we have all these elements. Just double click to get in, and then once we double click you'll see we have our mannequin's lower body. So we're going to take this and just sort of use it for reference. And we have our mannequin, our shadow layer, and a background layer which is locked, and we'll keep that locked. Alright, so there's one quick thing I want to point out. The walk cycle basically consists of 4 major keys. Some of these are all considered keyframes of a walk cycle animation, but when we're working in Flash or Maya, we only need about 4 different keys, and then the rest of it we can sort of in between with the software. The software sort of in betweens it for us, and then we can just sort of go through and fix the keys later. So I'm just going to point out some of the 4 keys that we're going to really pay attention to the most and what they're called. So this is our contact pose here, meaning this is where the heel hits the ground and contacts the ground. So this is going to be our pose 1. The next important pose is the squash pose or recoil. So this is going to be our next important pose that we're going to really pay attention to. The next one, third one, is the swing. That's where the leg swings forward and then connects with the ground one more time for the next contact pose. So basically we have right foot contact, squash, swing, and then contact with the opposite foot, with the left foot. And then we go through all 4 poses with the opposite leg. Double click to get into our mannequin pose, to get into our mannequin symbol. And we'll just start setting keys. We're going to start with the first pose. So again, this is reference. So let's look at pose 1 for reference. So I'm just going to select the pelvis, and I'm going to activate my free transform tool. And I want to tilt the pelvis forward a little bit to get him walking. Alright, so I'm just going to start getting him into his first pose. Now we're going to change the feet. Alright, so let's dive inside the foot symbol to find an appropriate foot. I think that one looks pretty good. That's foot number 7. Double click to get out of that. So make sure the foot's selected in the properties. Let's type in 7 and place the foot where it belongs there. And for the back foot, double click. Let's go inside and look for a foot. We can scrub along or just step. I think we're going to use this foot here. This is foot number 17. Alright, so let's double click to get back out. Go in make sure the foot is selected, and on our properties we'll put in 17. And we'll move it right back to where it needs to be. Okay, so now that we have our first pose set, there's one thing I want to do. I'm going to draw, you can see here in our reference we have this wavy line which indicates the up and down motion of the character as he's bouncing along on his walk. So I just want to make sure that we're consistent with that as we go along. So I'm going to go to my top layer here. I'm going to create a new layer by clicking this button. I'm not even going to name this. I'm just going to draw a line. This is just for reference. On this layer I'm just going to draw a line straight across my stage and just try and make sure it's as straight as possible. And this is just going to be for reference. And then I'm going to draw another line at the bottom where the foot is, the left foot, and we're going to do one for the right foot. I just want to make sure my feet stay on the same plane, and we can lock that layer so we don't accidentally select those lines. Okay, so let's go to our next pose. Let's go 4 frames down the timeline. So just use your greater than key to step down the timeline 4 frames. And let's select a row of frames all the way down to get all the body parts, and F6 to set a key. Now let's go ahead and set our next pose. So let's look at number 2 here. We're going to try and get something close to this. And we're going to have this character just walk on the spot, so he's not going to be walking across frame. We're going to move him across our stage later on. So we can see here that on the squash pose, his entire body moves down a little bit, really just looking at the pelvis. Alright, so let's grab the pelvis and the upper legs, and maybe shift, arrow key down. We don't want to do it too much, just a little bit, just to get the impression that he's bobbing up and down. Now one thing I want to point out that I can't stress enough is that as we're animating this leg, we have to try and make sure that our foot positions are an equal distance apart all the way through. So if I turn on onion skinning, we can see where our last foot was. We have to try and make sure that these are an equal distance apart until it gets to the back. Otherwise, when we move him across stage, it's going to look like his feet are slipping and popping. So again, we're just going to rough this in like we always do, and then we'll fix it after. When you're first starting out in animation, it's really good to just follow an example that's already laid out by somebody, and then later on the more you do of these walk cycles, eventually you'll be able to animate them on your own. Alright, so we're going to change this foot. Let's change it to 16. And double click back out. Make sure the foot's selected. Change it to 16. So really that right leg is just lifting off the ground. Alright, so let's go to the next pose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Step 4 down the timeline, select the whole row of keys, of frames, set a key, and let's go to number 3. Okay, so number 3 is you can see that's where he's at the highest point of his bounce. So let's grab the pelvis and the upper legs and bring it right back up to just a little bit above the line. So our initial pose was right on the line, so we'll bring this a little bit above. And this is the swing pose. So let's always first animate the leg that had the first contact. So this leg contacted the ground first, so we're going to take a look at those legs. Just keep your eye on those legs as we're going through our poses. So now this leg's basically directly underneath his body, or it's just a little bit past underneath his body. And we want to make sure that, again, as I mentioned earlier, that these feet are are an exact distance apart from each other. So let's do that first. Let's move the foot back. So that's about right. So let's go to the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just roughing these in. F6. And we're going to go to pose 4. Now we're back to the contact pose. So what we can do is grab the pelvis and upper legs, and we'll shift arrow key down. Just bring the pelvis right back to that line that we had it at before. And let's do the swinging leg first, because this leg is going to make contact now. So there, we've completed half a walk cycle here. So we have contact, squash, swing, contact. Now we're going to do the same thing but with the other side. So we're going to go back to we have a contact pose already. We're going to go to number 2 here. Do another squash. 1, 2, 3, 4. Step 4 down the timeline. Select the whole row, set a key, and now we're going to squash. I'm just going to go back and take a look at how far down I went for the last squash. Okay, so it's just a little bit down from the line. I'm just going to sort of eyeball that right about there. And I'm just going to go back again and look at the legs. Okay, I want to get it somewhat similar. So we're going toe to heel here with the last pose. Now we're going to do the swing pose. 1, 2, 3, 4 down the timeline. F6, and we're going to go with our swing pose. That was the third pose. So let's look at the last one we did. It was just, the pelvis was just above that line, so let's grab the pelvis, move it up just a little above. And I'm going to do that foot first because I want to make sure it's an equal distance apart. I realize things are breaking here a little bit. Again, we're just going rough here. And let's go with the final pose. So look back to our timeline. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this will be our final pose. Actually, it's going to be our first pose where the left leg makes contact. So let's just copy the entire first pose. Right click, copy frames. 2, 3, 4. Make sure we're 4 frames down from the last pose. Select the entire row of frames and let's go paste frames. And get rid of that last row that it pushed over. Alright, so now let's shut off our onion skinning and watch this. Okay, looks like a blocked and walk cycle. At this point we can create our classic tweens. And let's see what that looks like. You're going to notice the feet are going to pop all over the place. Just like in our jump cycle, we'll fix them though. Okay, the speed's okay. I didn't mean to move that pelvis, so I'm going to put that back. Okay, that's subtle enough that it doesn't really matter. Okay, so the speed's okay. Now I'm going to check out, are the knees breaking anywhere? With the tweening a little bit. Okay, so let's take a look at the right knee and let's focus on that for now. Grab the lower leg. Now let's go from pose 1 to pose 2. Nothing happening there. From pose 2 to pose 3, it does break a little bit. Set a key right in the middle between pose 2 and 3. We'll grab that lower leg and the foot, actually. Set a key on the lower leg and the foot. Just grab those both and fix them. That change will stick. And I'm just staring at the right knee there just to look for any problems. And it looks like we have a breakage between these two poses, so we'll set another key on the foot and lower leg. F6. I'm actually just going to make a change with the leg. Leave the foot where it is. Okay, so the right knee looks like it's good all the way through. And the left knee, okay, there's some breakage here. So right between pose 2 and 3. Looks like it's in the same area as the other one. So we'll F6 that. I'm going to get the foot as well. Actually, I'm going to try not to move the foot. Okay. No problem here. So I'm going to key the lower leg and foot on this one. And just tap it down to fix it. And the rest looks okay. Alright. So the knees are okay. Now let's do the feet. I'm just going to concentrate on the right foot for now. Okay. So we have an artwork change here between pose 1 and 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy pose 1 to the center. Somewhere in the center. And then we're going to copy the pose 2 foot also to the center, right butt up against the last one. Copy frames, paste frames, and then we'll just go and adjust those. If I scrub over that, okay, so those two new ones that I just copied, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this one as close to this one as I can, just by skewing it a little bit. So we can see how that works. It starts to skew into this next pose. We'll make sure the ankles hook up. So now we're doing our refining, and that looks okay. And then our foot pops from this artwork to this artwork, so we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to copy them to the center in between the two. You can see there are some imperfections here. The foot's floating around a little bit, but I'm not going to worry too much about that right now. I really just want to fix the artwork changes. So this foot on pose 4, we're going to copy it so the artwork changes a little earlier. Copy frames, we're going to go back a frame and have it change here in between our key poses. So let's just step down the timeline a little bit. It's kind of like a magic trick where we just flip the artwork at the fastest motion, or we skew it a little bit Copying the previous and the next key pose to the center really helps, so it pops in one frame. The foot's floating off the ankle too much here in between these two, so we're going to F6 that and just move it down. Okay, now we're going to fix this lower leg. Let's just get it to connect a little bit better. Scale it out a bit, and then there'll be an artwork change here between the second last and last poses. I want this foot to, before it pops into this number 17 pose, I think 16 is the less bent one. So what we're going to do is we're going to have it switch here, right in between the two last poses. So we'll set a key there again, and we'll set this to 16, and then 17 is the more bent foot. Yeah. So also our feet are coming off our lines here that we set earlier. So we have to try and make sure that doesn't happen. So it really is a process of going through and finessing all this. So I'm going to have to do the same thing I'm just looking at pose 1 here where our foot is on the line, and it does come off the line to swing, but then on the contact pose it needs to return. So still working on the right foot here, just scrubbing through, setting keys where it comes off the ankle and switching the foot artwork where we need to. Yeah, our foot came right off our guideline. So we're just going to make those adjustments here. We have to bring the leg back down. Need to unbend the leg a little bit. That right foot is good for now. I'm going to go through and make all the adjustments to the other foot. Okay, so we're going to switch the foot here. F6, and I believe that was 16. Making small adjustments as I go here. I'll have to set another key. Anywhere where the foot tends to get messed up, you'll have to set a key. Now I'm not going to move the foot forward or backward here because I like the amount of distance that it's moving. I'm going to actually make the change with the leg. Okay, so we want that to stay on 16 at this point. So we'll select the foot, make sure that stays on 16. And we'll have the foot switch here to 17. Okay, so we have one more fix to do here on the left foot. We can actually switch this foot. You can see that it switches on the contact pose, but we can probably switch it before that. So that's pose 7. Should probably actually switch it back here. Let's put it on 7, and on the next one on 7. And then move those into position. Okay, so now let's back up and see how that looks. Okay, so I don't think our timing is going to change, so let's just get rid of all these extra keys and remove frames. So if we do that, we can press on this little button here underneath the timeline. It's a loop button. press that and extend the range that it's going to loop right to the end. And let's press play. Enter on the keyboard. Okay, so that's not looking too bad. I'll let you guys make the fine adjustments before you send it to me. So let's get out of this layer of the symbols. Let's go to Shot Comp. And just make sure that the mannequin symbol is, when you look in your properties, it's on loop and it's set to 1. Oh, there's something else inside my symbol. I don't know what it is. Oh, it's these lines, right? Okay, we can get rid of those later. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this mannequin pan across the screen. So it looks like he's walking. Let's just try it at frame 50 for now. So we're going to animate his master symbol. So let's set a key at frame 50, make sure it's selected, and I'm going to hold down Shift and right arrow key, and I'll just go right across a certain distance, and I'll tween it and see how that looks. And we want to look for feet sliding. It's not too bad. The feet are sliding a little bit. Yeah, I think all we have to do is just slide him down a little bit more. So we're going to increase the distance that he travels. And since he's walking on the spot on the inside of the symbol, so the feet should appear to be sliding less. See, it slides back a bit here. We really want to avoid that. You don't want feet sliding, especially in a production. That's not too bad. The sliding is very minimal there. Maybe we can decrease it even more. Just give it 1 tap or 2 to the right to increase the distance. Let's check that foot again. Oh, it's pretty still. You know what? I'm just going to stick with that for now. Of course, you can go back and really fine-tune that. Sometimes you can't fix it by increasing the distance that he travels. You'll have to go into the cycle and fix one of the poses or two, and just change the pose so that the foot doesn't slide. But the feet have to be an equal distance apart for the walk cycle. They have to be an equal distance apart, and it has to be a consistent fluid motion. Yeah, actually the back leg, you can see the foot's shifting up and down. I'm actually going to go in and fix that because that's just not even acceptable. So just trying to keep that toe on the line as close as possible. I think that should be okay. Let's go back out and take a look at it. That's much better. Oh, there's some really funky stuff happening with the leg there. You see that? Right in here. Wherever it's at now, I think I'm just going to leave it. Yeah. There's a bit of a jump in the left leg when it's at its furthest part back, right there. But, you know, you guys can go back and refine your work. So that's basically our walk cycle. So what we want to do is, let's go back inside here. Okay, so on our shot comp layer, I want you to go in and hide the notes, or you won't have the notes, but hide the Preston Blair walk image and guide it. So right click on the layer and select guide, and that'll ensure that it doesn't render out in your final video. Also go inside, maybe there's lines inside the mannequin, so it's on layer 2, just hide that, your reference lines, hide it, lock it, and guide it so we don't see any of that. And you should be able to go back out to your scene 1. Actually, let's go back inside our shot comp. We're going to animate the shadow now. This will be very simple. It's just a straight 1 key, and just hold down, select it, hold shift down, and right arrow key all the way to the end, just to have it follow your mannequin. And we're going to tween that, and there you go. Actually, let's get rid of all these extra keys before you save it. Let's remove frames. Okay, so we only want it to play to 50 approximately, or wherever you've animated to. So the main points you want to remember here is, aside from what I mentioned at the beginning of the video, is as far as Flash goes, you want to try to eliminate and hide where the artwork changes by having the artwork pop in one frame, and at the quickest movement of the animation if you can. Also, try to eliminate or avoid any foot slipping by animating the feet an equal distance apart from each other as they're sliding across the ground. And if you're just starting out with walk cycles, follow the Preston Blair example that I provided for you, or another walk cycle example. After a while, you get used to doing walk cycles and you memorize the 4 key poses, and then you can go ahead and animate things like sneaks and fast walks, various other kind of walks. Sometimes walks can have a particular attitude to them, like confident or frightened, scared, shy. You can basically modify it to make walk cycles with particular attitudes. Okay, so go to File, Save As. So you can keep the same file name if you want and just add animated at the end. So Flash Body Mechanics 1 _ jump, and then add animated at the end so you know that this one has the animation in it. And then save it. And then go to File, Export, Export Video. Should be all the same settings as we always have. Export. And then, of course, as we always do, change it to QuickTime. Make sure that's at 720. You don't really have to click on that. And then choose your path and just choose a name. I prefer you have it as Flash Body Mechanics 1 Walk _ Walk movie. And that's it. Render that off, and we'll see you in the next class, Flash Body Mechanics 2.